want to just shout out to Crystal and thank you for allowing us to come. But with this, we'll also have time for any questions and that. I think maybe the easy thing, I don't know who there, maybe Crystal, if you want to handle that, if anyone does have questions, and especially as we go through some of our case scenarios, there may be questions. Maybe if there are, we'll have someone actually come up to the microphone because we can actually see there, and then we'd be able, that's where we could hear the question with it. So just so everyone can be a part of it with that. But with that now, I'm going to go ahead and share. And before I do that, since we got a bigger picture, Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead and say hi, introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth Burnett. I'm our church relations director here at SOAR. So thanks so much for letting us be here today. We're really excited to be able to share some training with you guys.
So with that, let me share my screen. All right. I think seeing a little bit of the corner, it looks like our big screen is being shared there and everything. You can see it. If not, someone let me know. But what our training is going to be on today is weekend buddy training and using a scenario-based approach. And bottom line with this is we want to be able to help everyone learn how to welcome individuals with disabilities into your church, into your Awana program, whatever you may have. Again, I'm Doc Hunsley. We're with SOAR Special Needs. We're in the Overland Park, Lenexa area of Kansas, in the greater Kansas City area. SOAR stands for Special Opportunities, Abilities, and Relationships. And we exist to transform the lives of special families, and we empower them to soar in their local and faith communities. And we provide respite on a monthly basis for families. We do summer camps and just give individuals the opportunity to be able to soar in the local and faith communities. But the other important thing that we do is we come alongside churches, just like Foothills, where we will help train them how to do disability ministry, how to welcome individuals with disabilities with that. So it's vital that we're able to do all that. Unfortunately, only 11% of churches in the United States have active disability ministry where they can actually welcome families with special needs and disability into any part of their church. So, I first want to thank all of you for coming out. I love all of that. And so that is wonderful that you guys are here to do all that. So again, Elizabeth kind of already introduced herself there at the beginning while you could see her. Well, we're blessed to have her. She's our church relations director. You'll be hearing her the second half. I'm going to do the first part of this, and then she's going to take over and do the second half of the training. So we're going to split this in half, but she's from Atlanta. She's really not fond of the snow. I'm trying to make her happy and keep her here, but we are blessed with her. She's got a true heart for training families and training churches to welcome individuals with disabilities. Again, I'm Doc Hunsley. I'm the executive director and founder of SOAR Special Needs. And I'll just share a real fast story of why I'm doing what I'm doing. My nickname is Doc. Obviously, that's not my real name. Real name's Steven. Everyone calls me Doc because I'm actually a pediatrician. I'm a pediatric ER doctor. Got sick taking care of my patients, almost died. I should have died. Bottom line, spent 46 days plus in the intensive care unit. Top 4 diagnoses on my chart, each one by itself had a 0.01 survival rate. None of the doctors expected me to live. 3 different times they told my wife to make plans that I wouldn't survive the night. But God had his hand on me, made it out of that, lost 75 pounds of muscle mass, had to go through 9 months of rehab to walk again, made it back to work despite having a flu shot, ended up with influenza, back in the hospital, almost died once again, where it was then determined that I'm the only known person in the world, main muscle allows you to breathe is the diaphragm, and half of mine is paralyzed, meaning I only have 40% lung function. And then shortly after that hospitalization, my second son, Mark, was born. I'm blessed with 3 kids and took a week of paternity leave. My first day back from work, from paternity leave, my boss called me and the hospital basically informed me I became a medical legal risk to the hospital and they were afraid I'd get sick and die, therefore effective immediately. Not just my job, but my career was terminated, and I could no longer practice medicine because I was a medical legal risk. And so I took the hardest job I had in my life, and that was become Mr. Mom for my son and my 2 boys at the time. I have a daughter now as well. When Mark was 8 months old, he had his first seizure, lasted over 4 hours. By the time he was 18 months, we got the diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, a very rare genetic seizure disorder. And then by the time he was 2, diagnosed of autism. So I'm a parent of a child with special needs. I get it. I live it. I fully understand it. I can't tell you the number of times I've been out in public where I've had complete strangers tell me I'm not just a bad parent, but I'm a horrible parent because my son's having an autistic meltdown, and they misinterpret that as me being a bad parent and not knowing how to discipline my child. But the bottom line is, if you ever see someone today with a child, especially, elementary age child who's misbehaving out in public or having a hard time, don't think right to that being misbehaving. Think autism. Autism today is 1 out of every 44 children. And they can't transition. They're having a hard time, maybe too much noise, too many people. There's a lot of things. And that's what it is. It's going to be autism. So, you can even ask, hey, is there anything I can do to help or something like that, instead of passing the judgment. But same thing happens at church. And then fast forward 11 years ago, my son Mark was cured of everything when he was born into heaven at the age of 5.5. So we were blessed with him for 5.5 years, learned all the highs and lows of being a parent, then walked through the grief of losing a child with special needs. It was 10 months after that we launched SOAR. SOAR's now been in existence for 10 years and 2 years as an independent nonprofit. So with that, let's kind of jump in to things. But first, I want to just go over a couple things that's important for everyone to know. And that's first, how do you talk about an individual with special needs or disabilities? And it's what we call person first language. It's the boy with Down syndrome or the girl with special needs. It's not the special needs child or the Down syndrome boy. Why? Because they're an individual first. We don't allow the disability to define them. So it's a family with special needs. It's not a special needs family. They're a family first, and then they have the disability. The only time that changes is when you talk about a ministry, because it can be a disability ministry or a special needs ministry, because you're saying what they specialize in doing. So that's important. Don't allow the diagnosis to be what defines the individual. The other thing, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves in life, don't talk about an individual in front of them as if they're not there. Many of our individuals are nonverbal, and too many people make the assumption they don't understand and we can talk in front of them. That's not true. Just because they're nonverbal doesn't mean they don't understand. Many of them fully understand everything. And so treat them with the respect that they are due. Treat them the way you want to be treated, and don't do that. Also, we need to model inclusivity and loving behavior to other children and to other students, and encourage them to work with their peers and be with their peers to learn how to do that. Bottom line, we have to accept the individual as a child of God who is uniquely and wonderfully made, because they are, and scripture shows us that. And then we want to really identify the individual's strengths and abilities and focus on that and not on their disability. The important thing that we have to always remember is you'll never be left one-on-one with an individual with disabilities. You always want to have at least another person in the room. That's for your safety. I'm sure, children's ministry, student ministry, they all have probably those same rules, but it goes here as well. Now, one thing that differs is you want to talk about a bathroom policy for individuals with special needs. I always say you need 2 people to take an individual to the bathroom who has special needs. And a couple things with that. One, if they're able to use the restroom on their own, leave the door open and stand in the doorway. Why? Too many of our friends get curious and start playing and start causing problems. So if you're in the doorway, you can prevent that from happening. Soap dispensers going everywhere, and soap going everywhere, paper towels going everywhere, water being thrown everywhere. you can quickly step in and do that. If they do need assistance, then you can have two people that can help with that. Now, I'm sure your ministry is in church is just like every other church, where you probably have a rule that men cannot change diapers. Great rule. I support that. However, I want you to think about individuals with disabilities. Many individuals with disabilities into their teens and adults, they have to wear diapers. Well, now you have to rethink that. What if you have a teen male or or an adult male who is in a diaper and they need a diaper change? Well, it's humiliating to have a woman or another teen trying to change the diaper of that teen or adult male. That's when you got to be willing on this front to change that rule to have men be a part of that. And again, you'd need to have at least two men to do it, but you're also going to need to have the men to lift, especially if you've got an adult male who's in a wheelchair. You're going to need that strength to help lift that person. Other things to remember just in general: always be encouraging, be patient, and frequently give praise. Have fun, enjoy yourself. And my most important rule for everybody is be a friend. That's the only thing that's required. So let's talk about training. Why is it important? Amazing stat I'm going to give you. I want all of you to remember this. 90% of individuals with disabilities do not attend church. 90%, 90. What does that mean? Individuals with disabilities and their families, that is the largest unmet people group in the United States. They're in our backyard. And I'm all for sending missionaries all over the world and sharing the gospel, but we're missing the biggest group in our own backyard. And there's three main reasons that family with disabilities don't come to the church. First is they're afraid the church isn't prepared to take care of their child. I've already shared that 89% of churches can't do it. So that's largely true. And again, why I'm so thankful for Foothills today and all of you here, you're learning how to welcome them so that you can do this. Second reason is they've been a burden. They know what a burden their child is, and they don't want to be a burden to the church, so they just don't come. And I'm glad you're all sitting, but here's the third reason, and this is the one that really breaks my heart. The family has been asked to leave the church too many times, and they just can't bear to be asked to leave again. Or they've completely given up on God because they've been asked to leave the church too many times because their child has a disability. In fact, I've got one child who was in my ministry. That family's been asked to leave 6 churches before they came to us. It happens all the time. And so we need to help. Again, my simple question, can you be a friend? That's all it takes. You don't have to have any fear. You don't have to have any experience to do it. It's just being a friend. If you're able to be a friend, we can train you. We can teach you on everything else, and you'll know what to do. And it's really that simple. So no experience is needed. You don't need to have special education. And I say this all the time. I haven't met a parent yet of a child with a disability or special needs who, when they got the diagnosis or when that child was born with the diagnosis, that they received an instruction manual on what to do for that child or how to take care of them. How did they do it? They did it through love and building relationships. Well, guess what? That's what the church needs to be about. Working with these individuals through love and building relationships. So through training like this, we can teach you on how to do everything else. So let's jump to the next one. Who needs training? I love everyone that's here today. My feel, everybody needs training. It needs to start as simple as with security teams, church greeters, information desk people, whoever may have contact with first-time visitors. I believe the entire children's ministry, the entire student ministry volunteers and teachers need it. And then obviously anyone working with special needs, those special needs volunteers, the disability ministry volunteers and the buddies, they all need the training. Why is that so important to have everyone? Well, let me share one of my favorite stories I've got with the importance of training. I trained everyone in my church for 8 years. I was the disability pastor at our church. I grew the ministry from 3 individuals to over 800 individuals with disabilities in 8-year time. and trained everyone. And like I shared with you earlier, if you ever see an individual out in public misbehaving, think autism. And one of the biggest reasons for that is they have a hard time transitioning. Any individual with special needs has a hard time going from one thing to another. They need time to process and change. They can't just flip on a dime. And so whenever you see that, think autism. I trained our security team, our parking lot attendants. The very next day was a Sunday. We have parking spot for visitors. We had someone parked there. Parents were trying to get their two boys out of the car, but one of the boys, about 8, 9 years old, parking lot attendant, noticed they're having a really hard time getting this child out of the car. They're fighting with him, and he immediately thinks, "Oh, Doc, oh, I bet that's autism." And so he simply walked up over to the family and said, "Hey, welcome to Grace Church. Is this your first time here? What can we, and all that." It was enough of a distraction that the parents were able to get the child out of the car. And then they said, "Yes, this is our first time here." And he goes, "Wonderful." And then he goes, "Let me walk you in to our information visitors desk." And he goes, "We have a wonderful children's ministry here, student ministry. We have a special needs disability ministry here." And then mom and dad go, "Oh, well, Johnny here has autism." Never once did our parking lot attendant ask if he had autism. He just shared everything. And he goes, "Fantastic. We'll go to the desk and then we'll call Doc Hunsley and the SOAR special needs team and they'll come help you." They went to the desk, called me in. My very first question, and this is what I want to challenge everyone here. The first question you should ever have when you meet a new family with an individual with a disability, that question should be, "Tell me something wonderful about your child." Too many times the first question is, "Okay, what's the diagnosis and what do I need to know? What bad can happen? Or what kind of behaviors do they have?" Those are important to know, but we don't need to know those right off the bat. Parents are never asked to tell you something wonderful about their child. Remember, these individuals are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God. Let's celebrate them. And I'll just go on a side note with that. How many times have you ever asked an individual with a disability what they want to do when they get older? What they want to dream to be? People rarely ask our friends those questions because they think they can't do anything subconsciously, so they just don't ask it. But we'll ask every other child we ever see, "What do you want to do when you get older?" We need to ask our friends that as well. Believe it, they have all kinds of dreams and they can do them. But I asked this mom, "Tell me something wonderful about him." Mom started tearing up because no one's ever asked her that before. And she immediately started telling me that Johnny was an amazing artist. He loved to color and draw. And I turned over to Johnny. I said, "Johnny, guess what? I've got some amazing crayons. Could you draw me a cool picture? I'd love that." He lights up. I get this huge smile. So then we get them to fill out the visitor information and that. And I go, "Hey, we'll go to the room." Mom immediately tells me, "You'll never get him in the classroom. That's one of our problems. We just can't get him in." I look over at Johnny. I say, "Hey, Johnny, you want to go get that paper now?" He jumps up, grabs my hand, and we skip down the hallway. Now, Johnny does have autism and he's nonverbal. And we're skipping down the hallway. I go, "Johnny, here's your room." He runs into the room. We go to the table. I get him the crayons, the paper, and he's having a blast and doing well. I then take the sibling to the room and then take parents up to the sanctuary. Mom and dad both at this point really are crying. Mom is sobbing. And mom stopped me. And this is one thing I'm never going to forget. Mom sat there and said, "Doc, I have no idea what your senior pastor's about to preach. But as far as I'm concerned, he can sit here and tell me that Satan sits on the kingdom of heaven. And I know that's wrong, but this is our new home church. Because no one's ever welcomed our family from beginning to end and welcomed our son for who he is like that." Obviously, we didn't preach that. And that family became a vital part of our church. Why? It was all because of that training. So everyone needs to have the training, and that's the impact you can have. And what it all leads up to is becoming an inclusive church. And basically what that means is that We want all of our individuals with special needs to feel that they are valued and just as important as any other individual that comes into your church. We want them all to be treated the same way. And then we want to have inclusive classrooms. And they are places where students are vital members of the classroom, where they feel a connection to their peers. And they may need, though, extra support to help with their general education curriculum with that. And I always say, have the golden rule of support. Support others the way you would want to be supported. But we need to create a culture of acceptance. And that goes a long way with everything. And we need to, remember scripture as we're talking through this. Genesis 1:27, all people are created in the image of God. Exodus 4:11, God is sovereign even with our disabilities. Matthew 25:40, we serve Christ by serving others. So that means we need to allow families with disabilities to serve. We need to allow individuals with disabilities to serve others. Even that means we have to get them a buddy to help. And then 1 Corinthians 12:27, we need to look past the disability to the person God has created to help them through that. So now I want to shift and talk about the role of the buddy. And what we here at SOAR really emphasize and encourage is that being included in your programming. So with Awana, with whatever you're having, have the individual with disability included with the rest of the individuals. They're age appropriate, they're developmentally appropriate individuals, but then you have a buddy, a volunteer who's there to help them. And this individual, they truly are there to help share the love of Jesus with that individual. And they're basically ensuring the safety of them by being a guide on the side. They allow independence when appropriate. So that doesn't mean they're right there with them all the time. They could be in the back of the room if they're able to engage on their own and do well. But you want to help them to get the most out of the teacher-generated curriculum. The buddy's not someone who's actually doing the teaching. They're just helping them stay focused with things. You also want to encourage the individual to interact with their peers and focus on their abilities, not their disabilities. Well, what do I mean with that? Let's say you have someone who has maybe fine motor difficulties. They can't really do some fine motor stuff, but they have gross motor. So you might have a craft. Well, this individual can't use scissors. They can't hold them and use that fine motor. Well, that's where you can come along and you can cut out the craft for them, but then you can get them crayons. You can even get them big crayons and they can color it. All of a sudden, that is their craft. They made that craft. You focused on their ability, not their disability. You don't allow them to struggle through that, but you allow them to do what they can. At the same time, we need to be positive, and especially when we're talking with the parents. We're always telling the parents positive things that are happening. We don't need to tell the parents all the negative things because parents only hear negative things. And especially at the church, we want the parents to know that we're able to care for their individual and take care of them. So we don't need to tell them all the negative things. And ask if the parents really need to know what happened. Do they need to know that Sally really was a turd all service and stayed under the table and wouldn't listen to you? No, not really. So, too many times we think, oh, because this child has a disability, we can tell the parents all the other naughty things that they did. Well, we don't do that with every other child. Why do we do it with an individual with disability? We need to pour love out on these parents and be gracious. And then again, remembering never being one-on-one with an individual. I want to take a special second and talk about showing affection. Our individuals with special needs and disabilities love showing affection. And we need to talk about the proper use of affection. So, but individuals love showing it through hugs and kissing and sitting on your lap. That's just not appropriate. So buddies and any individual, you should only give side hugs, high fives, fist bumps. Never allow kissing, no frontal hugs, and no lap sitting, no matter what. Even if you're related to the individual, you should not allow lap sitting. Why? Because you never know who's going to walk in, and it just allows you to be above reproach so that nobody can think anything wrong, and just lay that standard so everyone will always be on the same page. Now, let's talk through some helpful considerations that we know in working with individuals with disabilities. First, and one of the most important things is listen to what the parents say about their abilities or their needs. And feel free to ask questions if you need more information than what the parents give. For instance, on Awana, and I'm not sure when you do Awana, but I'll just say Wednesday night. Let's say if you're doing Awana on Wednesday night, parents bring in the child. If the parents sit there and tell you, Susie had a really rough day at school today, that's vital information for you. You're going to know, well, there's a good chance Susie's going to need some extra help tonight. And you'll just be aware of that. You may not push Susie as much to do some of the activities that you normally would try to do. So that can really help you. But again, and we've said it a couple times, you'll hear me say it over and over, identify their abilities and strengths, find activities they can actually achieve. And when you're giving instructions, they need to be clear and short so that you can get all of that. You also need to have extra patience. Be real patient when you're dealing with our friends, but be encouraging, give praise frequently. And here's another big one. You have to give limits, and you have to be firm with those limits and realize you set limits to provide safety for the individual as well as for others. And I'm going to give every single person here listening, you have the permission to tell somebody no and to stick to it. And it's absolutely okay to put somebody in timeout and prevent someone from doing something if they're not behaving. Set limits, because especially individuals with disabilities, they're going to try to push you as far as they can, see what they can get out of you. And so you're going to set a limit and then stick to it. It's amazing how many individuals, they know me now and they know they can't get by me. I got one little guy, he'll try to push the limit on everyone around him. And then I'll sit there and I'll turn the corner. He immediately sees me. He knows he's doing something wrong. Hands together, face down, and sorry, doc. I'm like, it's okay, Joey. Now let's be good and listen to everybody. So when you are giving choices, limit them to 1 to 3. I really prefer 1 to 2. So you can say, hey, do you want to sit here or do you want to sit here? But don't give them like 4 or 5 choices of things they can do. They just can't grab that. If they are getting frustrated, help them, but let them do what they're able to do themselves. Don't do it all for them, but help them engage in activities, especially with their peers. I want you to play with them. They need to play, and I want you to enjoy yourself. You need to have fun. Again, I already stressed this earlier, but don't talk about the individual in front of them as if they're not there or in front of other people. We really need to be respectful. And then we also want to teach other students, other children, to be accepting and loving of these individuals and set a good example. And again, accept them as a child of God who truly is uniquely and wonderfully made. So now let's shift and talk about some crisis prevention techniques. First and most important thing is we have to be proactive. That means acting before the behavior gets out of control. That's the best way to prevent anything. So the best way is being empathetic, paying attention. And what I mean with that too is we can get down on their level. That may mean get down on your knees and try to look at them in the eye and then talk in a calm, soothing voice. Don't be real loud. Don't stand and hover above them. And when you do it, you can put your hand on their shoulder and you can massage them. That deep massage can kind of help calm them. Now, there will be some individuals who don't like any touch whatsoever. And so you just immediately let go and stop doing that. But, massaging them and helping them, talking through, hey, Johnny, it's okay. Everything's all right. What can I do for you? Hey, it's going to be calm. Here, let's calm down. Let's breathe. Nice breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. You're just helping them relax. And then you want to give clarifying messages. Repeat what they're expressing to you to help you them show that you understand how they're feeling. But you can ask them to tell you what they want or show you what they want. Again, many of our individuals are nonverbal, and some of that behavior we start seeing is because they can't tell you what they want, but you can try to have them show you in different ways. That sensory stimulation is real important. That's massage on the shoulders, maybe a walk, spinning, moving to a different area, going to a quiet area, a sensory room can really help out sometimes. Again, we're going to talk about setting and enforcing reasonable limits. Set limits clearly and give choices. You can use if-then statements or first-then statements. Hey, Susie, first, we're going to sit for the story. Then we get to go to the table for snacks. That helps them know what's going to happen. And instead of just saying, hey, we're going to sit here first, they need to know that. And then, if you do this, then we get to go do that. That helps them understand what's going to be happening. And then ignore challenging questions. Redirect the individual whenever possible. I've got one of our friends, he loves to ask you what your birthday is or what your favorite color is. And he'll get stuck on that. He'll ask you over and over and over. I'll answer it the first time and I'll never answer it again, and I'll redirect him. And if I don't redirect him, he'll have a lot of problems and he'll have behaviors. So just help with that. Again, avoid overreacting. That's one of the things that can help us the most. Remain calm. Walk with the individual and try distracting them and then re-engaging them with things. One of the most important things I can tell you is physical techniques is always a last resort. You always need to call for help. We have to use the least restrictive method of intervention possible. And we only use physical techniques when there's threat of harm to themselves or others. And the only people who should be doing any physical techniques are those who have been trained to do such, like nonviolent crisis intervention training, CPI training, or something like that. And so no one else should be doing that. But we can also give a reminder of reinforcement. Have something they're working towards. And I'll go over that a little bit more here in just a minute for that. So I love referring to your toolbox. And this is a general toolbox that everyone should have, and it can be real helpful. This is something you can have in each classroom, and it's really dirt cheap with it. But let me just kind of break some of these down. First, in the bottom corner, there are star boards. This is the rewards that I was talking about. You can do it a whole lot of different ways, something like that. I've also got a mini clipboard that I got Velcro, that I put 5 pieces of Velcro down both sides, on 2 sides on the front, with a little star. And when they do something positive that I want them to do, they get to move that star over. And once all 5 stars get moved, they get their reward. What is the reward? It could be 5 minutes on the iPad. It could be 5 minutes of listening to a song they like. It could be that they go on a walk. It could be that they get to go to a sensory room. They get something that they work towards, and you have to agree ahead of time on what that reward would be. But it's great for motivating your individual to participate in activities and make good choices. You never remove a star for negative behavior. You only reward for positive behavior for it. So there are good physical star boards, and then there are also good phone apps that you can use for it too. So again, you're only rewarding good behavior. The other corner, you see a bunch of fidget toys. These can be used for a reward. It can be a tool for focus. Don't give fidgets if they're going to be throwing them. At the same time, fidgets, these are not expensive. The best fidget toys are Happy Meal toys, McDonald's Happy Meal toys. Ask your parents at your church if they would donate McDonald's Happy Meal toys. 80% of them make perfect fidget toys. And I'm telling you, parents are ecstatic to get rid of them out of their house, because most kids, mine included, they played with the toy at McDonald's. As soon as they got home, it went on the floor, and all that happens is you as a parent step on them and hurt yourself. So if you can get rid of a box of them and help your church and ministry, it's a great thing. But a lot of times, individuals with disabilities, they need something to be able to help distract themselves so they can actually focus to hear. An individual with special needs, they're not actually always going to be looking at the teacher and paying attention. And I'll just give one fast story with that. One of my teachers sat here and said, oh, we need a new buddy because, Joey is doing a horrible time. He doesn't listen. This was a first grade classroom. And I'm like, it was the best teacher we had and actually my best buddy. And I'm like, well, can I come in and observe this next week? And I did. She gave the story. Sure enough, all the first graders sat there and listened. They were great. Joey's in the back of the room playing with a little fidget toy and a little car. And the buddy's standing in the very back of the room, leaving him alone because he didn't need anything. He was quiet and behaving and sitting there. And the teacher finished the story and was getting ready to dismiss back. I said, just a minute, I've got a couple questions. Who do you think, asked the teacher, who did the best job listening? And she picked a little girl in the front row named Sally. I said, great. I go, Sally, what did you learn today? And I loved it. It was that perfect, children's, Sunday school answer. Baby Jesus. I'm like, okay, good. What else? Be good. I'm like, okay, great, fantastic. And then I go, Joey, can you tell me what you learned today? And I get, all right. Moses went up on top of this big mountain and God, oh my word, God has such a strong finger. He used his finger and wrote all the rules that we're supposed to follow on this rock, on this stone. And then Moses came down from the mountain and saw all the people worshiping this big gold cow. And it made Moses so mad, he threw down the rock with all the rules and broke it. And I think that made God really, really mad. And he was going to spank Moses. And then Moses had to go back up the mountain. If I were Moses, I'd be so scared because I think I'd get both spanked and time out. But he went back up on top, and then God had to do it all again with his finger. I think he had to get lots of Band-Aids on his finger because that had to hurt having to write it so many times. All right. That wasn't that week's lesson. That was the last 4 weeks' lessons. Who got it? Joey got it. Baby Jesus wasn't the answer. Joey got it. But she thought he never listened and didn't get it. He had to have that fidget toy to help him focus. That focusing on that fidget toy allowed him to open his ears and hear the gospel. He not only got it, he applied it, and he took the 4 weeks of lessons and put it all together. I'll take that any day over the answer of baby Jesus, who she truly was listening and looking, but she didn't understand or apply it. So fidget toys are wonderful for that. The other corner, you got timers, a physical timer or a virtual timer. My all-time favorite timer is an actual app. It's called the Children's Countdown Timer. This is wonderful. So many of our friends, we need to give them time to let them know different things or how much time left for something. And the Children's Countdown Timer, they can actually watch it count down, and there's a picture that shows up under it, and it works great for that. Wiggle seats. These are wonderful. It's great for your fidgety participants. It's also good to offer choices. You can throw down a couple different wiggle seats and say, pick a color, and they'll sit instead of refusing to sit the whole time. Up at the other corner, you can actually have boards, first then, if then boards. You can create expectations and then of the schedule. The if then are great for communicating consequences. And if they're verbal, you can have them repeat it to ensure they understand what you're talking about. And then schedules in the middle. Having a visual schedule really helps our friends know what's going on. It helps with transitionings as well to be able to go through everything, and then they can actually go through and cross things off. So with all that, we set up, I've just gone through a lot, kind of going with the fire hose, setting things up. We now want to shift and go into some of our training scenarios. And I'm going to hand off to the amazing Elizabeth, and she's going to take over for you here.
Right. So this is where we get a little bit of interaction. So if I could get Crystal or somebody there at the church that would be willing to be a bit of a spokesperson to come up to the microphone, I'd greatly appreciate it. We have some scenarios where you guys get to think through how to apply this information. And then if we want to get a couple of responses, we'll talk through it a little bit. All right, so our first one is the teacher instructs the class to have a seat because it is time for circle/group discussion. The student that you're working with refuses to have a seat and starts to get agitated. What do you do? So if a couple of you want to throw out some answers and then just let us know what those are.
Did you guys hear that?
I suggest a wiggle seat. Come sit down on a wiggle seat here.
So Carolyn said she suggests a wiggle seat. Did you hear that?
Yeah, that's a great option. Any other ones?
If you come sit here in the circle, you get this little fidget toy.
And she also said, if you come sit in the circle, then you can hold the fidget toy.
Great. So working for something, having a couple seating options, those are great. So having, especially if a child's verbal, you can have them repeat that first then statement too, to just say, okay, if I go sit down in the circle, then I get my fidget. Having them repeat that kind of helps them process a little bit more. If you don't have wiggle seats, you can also do 2 mouse pads that are different colors. And so then you can say, do you want to sit on the green one or do you want to sit on the red one? And that works just as well. And it's important in this one to get down on the child's level, just to stay calm, kind of talk through what's going on with them, talk through those expectations. You can use really simple language about letting them know what's expected. Hey, we need to go sit down with everyone so that we can listen to the lesson. But also I want to challenge you, does this child really need to sit down for circle/group discussion? Or is it possible for them to stand in the back of the room or even pace? Because sometimes, just like how Doc was talking through fidgets and how helpful that is, sometimes having a little space in the back of the room where somebody can pace, that can be really helpful for them to be able to pay attention as well. So that's kind of some ideas on that one. All right, we'll move on to our next one. And if you guys have any questions throughout, just shout them out and we'll get those answered. So our second scenario, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Carolyn does have a question.
Yeah.
She mentions it's okay to have a child kind of in the background, to
Okay, hold on. I'm going to bring the phone to her so she can. Oh, you're okay.
Okay, you mentioned that it's okay to have the child in the background if they need to pace or they need to be in movement, because some of our kids that's in the handbook time with Awanas can't do their learning their verses unless they are moving, unless they are pacing. And that's okay, because usually at that time we've only got 1 or 2 child. But if you're in a large group and they're in the back and you need to allow them to pace or have movement, how do you interact that with the rest of the class if it's distracting the rest of the class?
So that's where you can just set up like boundaries throughout it of like, hey, if you're going to pace, we can do that in the back where it's not as distracting to everyone else. That's a great option. You can
Elizabeth, wait, I don't think they're set up for the mic yet.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, we're here. We're good. You can go ahead and speak.
Perfect. So, and honestly, I would even just say, you may even have it be a fun thing of, okay, who's gonna stand today and who's gonna sit today, kind of thing, and just trying to be flexible with that. You can also just have the expectation of, we're still going to be listening, and just going through what listening looks like, and just having that. And then if it's really becoming distracting, you can pull them out and do that lesson one-on-one, but we really don't want that. We want them to be in as much as possible. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think the boundaries are great. And then again, you can have an individual, maybe another volunteer or a buddy who's back there observing them, because I think part of what you were saying too is not having the manpower to be able to watch both areas. So it may be just someone who doesn't need to have a buddy all the time, but maybe you've got someone who can kind of watch that area where they'd be able to walk, if that would help too.
And it could be too that you might even set up like a taped off area and say, okay, this is our standing area, you know, just kind of depending on your setup and what's going on. You can always be creative and figure out what works. We encourage everyone just to continue to be creative and to not be afraid to fail. That's okay, and just be flexible.
Okay. It's a good idea. Oh, I think we have 2 more questions. We have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
We're going to load you guys up here.
Oh, no worries. We love it.
That's why we're here.
Okay. One of our other questions is now, how do you handle the complaining of kids who don't need fidget toys, wiggle seats, or other special accommodations, yet they see the other children who have them, who actually truly need them, and yet the other kids are like, well, how come they get them and we don't? So, because that is one thing that we do see a lot in our Awana group lesson time.
Yeah, so we encourage you to be really honest with all the kids of just saying, hey, this is something that's going to help Sally focus. This isn't a toy for her, but this is actually a tool. And so that's a way that you can describe that. And generally kids are really understanding and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Normally we found that kids that don't have it are more curious than anything. And also if it really is something where you have quite a number of individuals that really need fidgets, we've had churches before that they have even a fidget box where everyone can go and grab one. And so then everyone has one and you have your boundaries and your rules around your fidgets. And saying, you know, we keep these, they help us be quiet. We keep them to ourselves, those kinds of things. So that's an idea as well.
Okay. And the next question, have you ever known autistic people to pace or jump up and down?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what this says? And
shaking their hands.
they're shaking their hands while watching a movie. And what's behind the fidgetiness and why?
Yeah, that's really common for our individuals with autism. That's one of stimming behaviors is kind of what we call that, all the hand flapping or just kind of shaking, like those kinds of things. And that's one of the ways that they are trying to process their environment. And so just kind of thinking through that, sometimes fidgets can help with that. But honestly, it's just something where it's a lot of education surrounding it and saying, hey, this is something that you know, Johnny does, and that's okay. And so normally, as long as kids are understanding of what's going on behind it, they're not going to be mean or rude about it. They're more just curious than anything else, kind of going back to fidgets.
Well,
Sometimes it's also for extra stimulation that they need. You know, sometimes they're not getting enough stimulation, so that helps them get a little extra.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because I have a son, my oldest son, he's 25. And early on, he was diagnosed with dyslexia and other reading, but he was never really diagnosed as far as autistic. But the older he's gotten, the more we have seen that kind of thing, and he's even been called out on it at different times, you know, as to why, you know, even when I'm preaching, there are times where he has to get up
Mm-hmm.
and move, and you know, there's been times where people have called him out on it, and my wife and I have always suspected that he is autistic to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that this is really, you know, an opportunity where you can educate the congregation. That's something where one, especially if your son is fully, you know, verbal and able to articulate it, teaching him to advocate for himself in that way of, hey, this is something that helps me focus, but also explaining to the congregation just about disability awareness. Like, you know, this training right now is a great great way to do that. And also, we have several times where we've talked to congregations specifically about autism and what that looks like, because it looks so different for every single individual in the way that they process it. And ultimately just making it really acceptable in your church to be able to get up or stand in the back or, walk around in the back a little bit, that sort of thing.
Well,
Yeah,
and I know this is more for kids, but what do you do with adults? Because these, people grow up, obviously, these kids grow up. They probably don't grow out of autism.
Yeah. Doc, were you going to go ahead?
Yeah, well, first off, with that part, everything we're talking about here applies to adults as well. So nothing we're talking about is only for kids. Everything applies for adults as well. No different with that. The one thing I was going to say for autism, the thing we need to remember, it's a spectrum. So there's a wide range of behaviors and activities. Everybody's different. I've never met two individuals with autism who are the same. In fact, there are twins. I've had several twins with autism, and they're different in their respects with it. So it really is a massive spectrum. Many, as far as the, some of those stemming, sometimes our friends don't know why they're doing it. They just have this overwhelming sense to do it. So they do it. But as far as, do you do anything different if they're adults? Not really. Everything we're talking about here today and sharing with you, and we've got, several other, scenarios here we'll go through to help you understand, get some more things in your toolbox. That's all can be applied to adults as well as kids, really any age. The bottom line is creating relationships with these individuals and teaching people to welcome them for who they are. And really what I always say, we're all disabled. Every single one of us. And what I love the best, honestly, I really think everyone else is disabled. Individuals with disabilities, they're truly not the ones disabled. We are. And why do I say that? Every individual with disability that I know, they are amazing. They're so loving. And the thing I love so much about them, they see right to the heart for an individual. They don't see the color of someone's skin. They don't really look at the actions of them, but they go right to the heart and see the heart for who they are. We don't do that. We have to see the color. We have to see the sex. We have to see everything else. And then we make our own judgments and base off of that. And so that's why I think we're really all, disabled. But that's one of the things I love with them. And so we can learn so much from them. But yeah, we can teach a whole lot more on autism. But there are so many different things, but it's just creating those relationships, being willing to understand. Yeah, it's just, they're a little bit different. They do things that we don't understand. And we have to realize their brain processes everything completely different. I've got some videos that you can watch that really kind of help open your eyes to just even how sound makes such a difference for an individual with disability. I do I actually have a message I do for churches on autism awareness that it's actually entitled Spiritual Autism, because I compare our spiritual life being autistic to individuals with autism and how we can learn from that. But
and I was going to say that you were talking about how that the church hasn't really responded well to people with special needs. And certainly we have faced that as a Christian family in churches, really since my older son was young. At times people have been very even mean at times without any consideration as to who he is or that kind of thing. But I even think that not only that, but even public schools are not necessarily set up for that kind of thing either. And ultimately what happens is, you face this thing where, you're not a very good parent because this kid has issues.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
But
And so we also really encourage, especially, in the main congregation, whenever you're seeing things that you can point out to just educate the congregation. It's a great opportunity. Like we have, some individuals sometimes that in worship are just really, really vibrant and, will drum or will make a lot of noise. And you can have your worship leader acknowledge that and say, look at how they're worshiping, thanks for how you're worshiping today. And bringing attention to the congregation in a really positive way about that.
And kind of piggybacking more on that, I think again, in today is going a long ways. It's the education, just learning. I shared earlier how, I've been called a horrible parent out in public. Well, the thing I didn't share with you, I can't even tell you the number of times I've had police officers threaten to arrest me or tase me because my son's behavior and what I'm doing to help prevent it. I'm doing the right things, but it's a lack of education, lack of knowledge. And so it's rampant. It's everywhere. It's in our whole society as a whole. Our society needs to learn better. We need to improve a lot of things. And I could go on, I could do an entire talk for hours on it, but it goes even as far as unemployment. Unemployment for individuals with disabilities is 80%, and it's legal to pay individuals with disabilities sub-minimum wage just because they've got a disability. And that's legal in every state. And, it's things like that. We've got to make changes. So it's in our society, it's rampant as a whole. And we just have to do a better job educating and standing up and letting others realize these individuals are amazing people. They have a right to be here, and we have to help them, and we have to welcome them for who they are and where they're at. And we don't have to try to make them conform and transform to who we think they need to be. They are themselves, and we have to welcome them as that and welcome their family.
Yeah. So, and we do have one more question.
No worries.
So at school, because one of our Sunday school teachers here is also a substitute teacher for school. And so one of her questions is, at school, some of the autistic kids wear headphones. So how do those help? And is it something that we should and could keep at the church in case of those situations arise?
Yeah, for sure. So headphones are a great option for sensory overload. So that's actually, we have about 10 scenarios we're going through, and that's going to be one that we're going to talk through a little bit more here in just a few minutes.
It's something that should have been in my toolbox list. I just realized I left that off. So,
but
yeah.
it is a great tool just to reduce some sensory stimulation. So any other questions right now?
We have, I think, one more question.
Okay.
Going back to your first scenario.
Do you want to come up here and ask so they can hear you? Otherwise, yeah.
So going back to your first scenario. Oh, I gotta get
Yeah,
closer.
you have to get closer.
Can you hear me?
We hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So going back to your first scenario, you talk about how ways to do seating. What if they walk in and don't want to sit at all, and they
That's
just want
fine.
to sit?
Yeah.
I mean, wiggle seats don't help. They unplug the wiggle seat.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it in more than in other kids as well.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah, I have, an adult that I've worked with in a class that literally he has gone to this church for 7 or 8 years, and they have never seen him sit down in the class. Like, he just doesn't sit. And that's just something that they know and they work with, and he paces around the room, and that's okay. So that's just something that they know and work around. And so that's something where he knows where he's able to go and where he's not able to go. And it's just been continual getting used to the environment, and also just working with him and being flexible. And
Now, is that where like maybe taping a section off would come in handy for
It
individuals
could.
like that?
yeah, it could, or, for us, it was in a really small class too. And so we invited him to come change the slides for us for our PowerPoint and help us teach in, you know, a way that was able to get him a little bit of movement and not be too distracting. So it's something where it totally depends on the individual and the situation. But, you know, just think about, do they really want to, are they wanting to interact with everyone a lot, or are they wanting to not really be as seen? So I kind of think about it in that way. So if they're really wanting to interact, let's build on that and let's try to incorporate them more into what into what's going on. So can they pass out papers? Can they go and change the slides or write something on the board? Those kinds of things would be great. Can they pass out a snack? Or if they're not wanting to interact, then it could be, you know, we're kind of hanging out in this area, and that might be where taping off a section could be helpful, or, you know, you have something else in the room that's kind of a natural boundary, and saying that they're able to be over there.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, was that all the questions, everybody? Yeah. Okay, I think we're.
Can I
think
say
we're caught up on
something?
questions.
Yes, go ahead.
We've got a
Okay.
question online here.
So I really want to say something. You know, I've been a special needs mama for over 10 years now. And I have my own individual learning disabilities and things going on myself. I think the question I ask myself a lot is, does this really matter? Is this hurting anyone? Is this, you know, you pick your battles. Certain things are worth it and certain things aren't, and let it go. Be more open-minded about what's going on around you, because my children are never going to fit into my box, and I can't make them. And so why would I make my life hell or theirs trying to get them into a box that they don't ever want to be in? Right? And so I think you've really got to change your thinking about how you live life with individuals, and just don't take it too seriously. If you're a type A personality and it's rules, that's a struggle here. But you have to remember that it's not about you. It's about loving that individual and coming into their world instead of you bringing them into yours. Right? And so that's all I have. I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, that's great. And I you know, I think that's awesome. And ultimately what Doc and I are doing through this training is just giving a lot of tools and ideas. Every individual is different. There's a lot of these things that will work. And then there's sometimes where you just keep getting to know them and keep building relationship and understand that they may have something really, really unique that helps them, that Doc and I don't know. But through building relationship, you can figure that out. So let's go ahead and we'll move on to our next scenario. And I'm sure we'll encounter some more questions throughout. And that's really good. So the next one is the group comes in after playing outside or doing gross motor activities, and you see that the child you're working with is way too revved up to sit quietly for a group activity. And this is a pattern that you notice weekly. What can you do to prevent it?
A few minutes before you go in, just walk, start calming all the kids down.
So one suggestion was a few minutes before you go in, just calming all the kids down, kind of walk them around before you go inside.
Yeah, that's great. And sometimes individuals need even more time to transition. And so that's great. Any other ideas?
Any others?
I think maybe using like a timer to let the individual know that they're going to be changing, and then I'm using that time for the calm down.
Yeah, for sure. So either using a timer or time warnings work really well. Sometimes you can get really detailed with this, or you can have it a little bit more generalized. But even when I'm teaching general children's ministry, I say, you know, we're going to play for 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 1 more minute. Okay, it's time to clean up. And so that's really helpful. And sometimes with some individuals, I will break that down even more of, okay, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. you know, sometimes we'll count down, and then generally that has helped them process. So it's sometimes too many, you know, or a ton of time warnings isn't necessary, but sometimes they can be really helpful. You can allow them to come in before everybody else, like what you're saying, giving them a little bit of time to quiet their body, to cool down, go take a sip of water, can be great. This can be something where maybe it's partially going in with everyone that is still keeping them revved up. And so going in by themselves or with, you know, a couple of people might be a little bit of help, might be helpful. Just making sure that you're able to take a little bit of walk, take a little bit of a walk to calm down, using that first in language to help them know what's expected. At first, we're going to walk to the class, and then we're going to do worship, that sort of thing, giving them just a little bit of schedule orientation to that. Maybe having a schedule could be helpful during this time. And then also maybe even some like calming breathing could be helpful too, if they're just like, okay, like let's calm down a little bit more. So any other questions or comments with that one?
Nope, I don't think so.
Great. All right. The next one is the group is having worship, and the student that you're working with is rocking, covering their ears, and seems to be getting upset. What should you do?
That could be where the headphones come in handy.
Most definitely. Any other ideas?
You remove them from the situation so they can calm down.
Yeah, that could definitely be a good possibility. Anything else?
Any others? Go for a walk.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is something called sensory overload. And so it's basically where the individual is getting way too much sensory input, and we're trying to figure out what that is so that we can reduce that. So here is an illustration that we really like to use. It's actually from an individual that has participated with SOAR named Catlana Vrana. She's an author and she has autism. And so this is a photo of what she described as what it feels like for her to have sensory overload. And she described it as her brain being on fire, because there's so much coming in. And whenever that's happening, she cannot focus on anything else. And this might be where you might see some sparks in behaviors that are going to happen just because there's so much and they have to release some of that input. So what you can do instead is reduce it. A lot of times that could be noise. So headphones could be a great solution. I have a ton of individuals that we've worked with that simply giving them a pair of headphones completely calms down the situation. And sometimes they'll even say, because they're so aware of it, they'll say, you know, it's getting a little too loud. Can I get some headphones? Great. They've already identified that. Sometimes that won't happen, and that's okay too. But other things that might be what's making the student upset is an overcrowded room. The lights, especially fluorescent lights, can be really, really hard on eyes. And sometimes it might even be a smell. So that one's a little bit more rare, but it could be, especially if it's something that you're noticing, that could definitely be something that they're going to be noticing even more. So then it can just be stepping away, removing that in whatever capacity, move to a different location within the room, see if that's going to help. You can also try to introduce a sensory toy to help them focus on something. Obviously, do not do this if you think that it's going to be thrown or used as that would cause further problems. This is also a great time to give some of those deep pressure squeezes, and that kind of helps them feel safe. And so that can be a great option. If you don't have headphones, earplugs can work. And then ultimately you can try to step out of the environment. We really want them to stay in, you know, as much as possible, but especially if there's a window, you can watch through that or stand right outside the door. If you have a live stream capability, depending on, you know, what's going on, if it's the main service, whatever, you can go and do that in another environment that's a little bit more controlled. So those are a couple ideas there.
And another question, we have a couple of questions. So we do have a student who, he's 3, and in some situations, he still will push the other kids and show some form of aggressive tendencies in that. So right now we do have a pop-up tent that we do use to help those who get overwhelmed. And so that's actually came in handy for us quite a few times. But other than that, like what else can we do in those situations where if the child is pushing another child, how do we take that on so that it can be a learning experience, but that way the other child's not getting pushed and everything as well?
Yeah, of course. So this is something where just saying pushing specifically as an action, do you know if it's a result of like being overloaded from sensory stuff? Because there could be other things going on.
Well, I know with that situation, it seems like there's normally just 2 kids in the room. So I don't think it's as much as having too many people around, but as far as maybe the lighting or other sounds like loud sounds might be triggering them in that situation.
Yeah,
So,
that is a possibility. It could also be just, do you notice any sort of changes before he pushes anybody? Do you see some sort of a buildup? Is it something where the other student in the room, he doesn't, there's some sort of conflict going on? Anything like that?
a lot of it is either in the sharing of toys. He's definitely not wanting to share the certain toys that he has. He's working on that, so he is getting better. But then if we're doing the lessons with him, he will not want to do that lesson. So that's when he starts showing that aggression.
Yeah. So that's where I wouldn't necessarily, this doesn't sound like sensory overload to me at all. So I wouldn't really necessarily focus as much on sound or lighting or that sort of thing, but it sounds like a lot more of setting boundaries and limits surrounding toys and surrounding the schedule. And so I think setting up some firm kind of transitions of timers might help a lot in the situation of, we get to play with this toy for this amount of time. And we're going to play for this amount of time, and then we're going to do the lesson. A starboard may also be really helpful for the lesson, especially, and saying, we're going to have calm hands, or a safe body is sometimes some language that we'll use surrounding that. As long as they're doing that, giving them a star as they're listening, as they're interacting, as they're doing things positively with their peers. As Doc mentioned before, with starboards, we never take away stars, but it's something that they're earning. And so that's something where he might be working towards his favorite toy. And whenever he gets his favorite toy, he gets it for 3 minutes. That's kind of an arbitrary time, but giving him that amount of time. Because something that you may also see is, if you don't put a limit on that favorite toy, that's going to cause more problems later on. Okay. And so that's a little bit of a way that you can work through this situation as well.
Okay.
Other thing I'd say is, you can also have, if they're interacting, real touchy with other individuals, just move them to the back of the room and have someone sit with them in the back of the room. And a lot of times you'll see they'll get upset because they want to be with the other kids. And so just simply tell them, well, once we have nice hands, good feet, we'll be able to be with others. And so first we'll sit here, then we'll be able to go back. And so letting them know, again, it's going with those limits.
Yeah. And honestly, with this situation, I don't think a pop-up tent is going to help. That's, I don't think that that's kind of what's going on behind it. Of course, that's a great option for other things like sensory overload, if the lights are too bright, if the sound is too much, if they need their own space, that sort of thing. But may not be the best solution for that specific kiddo for this situation.
Okay. And then, have you ever known autistic people to need music in order to go to sleep?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's something pretty common of just different sensory needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then ideas to bring a child, what's SPD? Oh, sensory processing disorder that has completely shut down back to the present situation.
Yeah, so those kind of situations, we have a ton of individuals in our ministry that have a hard time processing sensory, informations. So that's where really just working with them, giving them that space and that time. What really happens, and we can talk through this in other trainings as well, but there's this whole spectrum of crisis within sensory processing specifically. So whenever someone gets really over escalated, you have to have a lot of time to calm down, and each individual takes it. That kind of varies depending on them. Sometimes that might be 5 minutes for somebody. It might be an hour for somebody else. And so, but you want to make sure that they've fully calmed down and processed whatever that is before they're reintegrated. Otherwise, they're just going to go right back into whatever that is.
Nice.
And we'll have
Any
a
other
scenario
questions?
kind of going with that coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, well, let's keep moving on to our next one. So this one is, you have a child who keeps putting items in their mouth. What do you do?
I don't know, I still deal with that.
Carolyn.
I would say, try to replace that item, remove that item, and if you're offering snacks to the children, replace it with a little snack.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is something, it's kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about with sensory overload. It's where someone is seeking sensory input. So one solution could be a snack. That could be a great time to see if they're hungry. It could be something that they need some movement. It could be something where they need a sensory box. Like we have these really, really cool vibrating snakes or some different vibrating toys that are larger that wouldn't fit in their mouth, but provide a little bit of sensory stimulation. And so this could also be a great time for if they want to bounce on the trampoline or go swing in the swing, that sort of thing. Getting some different movement in is great. We have, even in one sensory room that I know of, there's like a little obstacle course that's taped off in the sensory room. And so it could be a great time to say, okay, let's go do the obstacle course, that sort of thing. And sometimes we have individuals that just really, really have a lot going on, that they want to put everything in their mouth. And this is something, remember, anything that you're seeing in church, anything that you're seeing in Awanas, in the school, parents see it at home. They're aware of it. This individual is going to be putting stuff in their mouth there as well. And so something that parents may have is like a little, it's called jewelry. It's like a little chew necklace or bracelet that someone may bring and can chew on. And so that's something where you can encourage them to bring that if they have it. I wouldn't provide it in your ministry because that just gets a little gross. But anything that they're putting in their mouth, just make sure to clean it. And you can also just give simple reminders that hopefully will work of, no mouth, quiet hands, what goes in your mouth, those sort of prompts and questions.
Nice. Okay, I think that was all the questions on this end.
Great. All right, our next one, the child you're working with is in a full meltdown, kicking, screaming, and is in danger of hurting themselves or others. How do you handle this?
I know in the past that we've had to hold the child before, a few years ago. We haven't had that situation in a while, but I know one thing we have to make sure we do is help that child before those things happen. But I don't know if anybody else has any idea. Oh, we have one.
If the child's on the floor kicking and screaming, give them a big fluffy stuffed animal to hang on to while he's doing it.
Yeah, that, that is a possibility. So that's something where this can be especially a really unnerving situation for volunteers, or for staff too. This is part of why we do this training, is just to dispel fear. And so we want to make sure that everyone is safe in this situation, that the individual's safe, that all the other kids are safe, that you're safe. And so the first thing that you want to do is create distance between this child and their peers to just ensure everybody's safety. So it's a great time for a bathroom break or for the class to go get some water. It's always going to be easier to remove everyone else than it is to remove the individual that's having this meltdown during this situation. However, there are times where it might be just a really, really big crowded room. And in that instance, then removing the child is safer. However, that's kind of not as preferred. It could be that as you're working through the behavior, you need to figure out what the trigger is. And oftentimes this is going to be where you're going to figure out the solution. So it could be where we talked about before, sharing, and this child's toy was taken, figuring out those things, and also remembering you might be that trigger. There are several times where I've been the trigger, where Doc's been the trigger, and it's something, especially at our camps, if we're working through something that is really, really challenging, after a minute or two, if we're not seeing that somebody is starting to calm down, we're calling for someone else to come and help and see if maybe they could help resolve the issue. In terms of holding the child, we don't want to do that unless you are trained. That's always a last resort, and only whenever other techniques haven't worked, if they're in danger of self-injury, that sort of thing. If you guys are wanting training on those physical interventions, that's something that we can talk through a little bit, and we're able to help with that. But another option is giving a weighted blanket. Sometimes that's really helpful. Deep pressure, if they're able to, if it's safe for you to move into that, and kind of diminishing the lighting. So we're wanting to reduce that sensory stimulation. Oftentimes that's going to bring down whatever behavior, at least so that you can continue to work through it. And remind them something that you're looking forward to. So that's going to be snack or playing outside, their parents coming, something that they were working for, and reminding them that we have to be calm to do those things. And so this is something where it could take a little while to get someone fully calmed back down and ready for that. And so that's something where you want to just continue to be with them and be present, and remember that your behavior is going to affect their behavior. So you need to be as calm as possible. And if you're not able to be calm in that situation, getting some assistance. So if the kid is self-injurious as well, and giving a fidget toy doesn't help, you can always call for another volunteer to come in. We really, really don't want to call parents, but that is a last resort. We really want to allow parents to stay in service, because ultimately, if you're going to call them, then they're going to probably think, oh, well, you can't handle my child. So we don't really want to do that, but there could be a point where that might happen.
Okay. Oh, you got another question? Yes, come over here.
Okay, so I have a question. How do you deal with a child who crossed a boundary? So like, let's say they're in a group setting and it's Awanas and they're in a circle and discussing, but they got in trouble. So you're like, you need to sit out. Then the meltdown starts. How do you work with that?
Yeah.
Like,
So Yeah, this is where your limits are really important. If you, as hard as it is, giving in to that and letting them come back because they started a meltdown, that is only going to increase those meltdowns in the future. So staying with those limits is really important. And continuing to work with them. This is something where you can be present with them, and you can even give options of, hey, do you want to take this time out in the hallway, or can you stay in the room to do this timeout? And working through that. But making sure that they're going to be safe, that they're not going to hurt anyone else is really important. And so if it's continuing to escalate, moving them out of the classroom might be good for that timeout, and then saying, okay, whenever you're calm, we can come back in and we can join our friends, but we cannot do that unless we're calm. And this could be something where on the front end, if you know that this child is really, really prone to whatever that behavior is that made a timeout necessary, reminding them of the rules and expectations of being in the circle. And maybe that's something where on the front end, giving a fidget or asking them more questions, engaging them a little bit more, seeing what's going to help them be successful in being there. Because that may also be something where they're having a really hard time focusing. They're having a really hard time sitting still. So maybe a wiggle seat would have helped prevent it. But thinking through what's going to help them be successful so that we don't get to timeout. And we don't have to work through that.
More questions? No. Oh, no, we have 2 questions.
One thing that I saw at school, in a special ed room that was kind of cool, was they have a boy that when he does his little games on the iPad, he gets worked up and he like frozen.
Can you hear Laura, by the way?
I can't hear this one very well.
Okay, hold on. I'll have her come over here.
One thing I saw at school that was kind of cool was they have a boy that he gets worked up when he's doing his little game on the iPad and he throws it across the room and breaks them. So they have a carpet on the floor, and so they can kind of tell when he's starting to get worked up, and then they tell him to put the iPad down and go to the carpet. And then he just sits there for a few minutes, rolls around, and then when he's done, he goes back to his desk, and it was kind of cool.
Yeah, great. You know, I have a little girl that I actually nanny, and she gets worked up sometimes watching specific videos. And so we just have a rule of, okay, if we're upset, we can't watch this. So yeah, and she knows that, and she's learned how to regulate herself surrounding that. So great.
Did you have a question, Carolyn?
Okay, they're in the middle of the meltdown, and it looks like it's a pretty, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so they're in the middle of the meltdown and it looks like it's pretty severe. And it doesn't look as if like there's no end. And you've tried to implement some of these suggestions. Do you just stand by them and just let it run its course?
Eventually,
wait till it's over?
Eventually it's going to stop, especially if you are not trained in physical intervention techniques, which if you're having the situation, I would highly recommend that you are. But one thing that we always evaluate whenever we're thinking about a hold or physical interventions is, you know, is it going to be safer for them to just be by themselves? And so we're fine with a room being destroyed. We can replace stuff. And so that's something that you can also evaluate too, of, is this a time where we just kind of clear out what anything that could be dangerous for them in the room is, and then we step out and we watch them from a window and we just give them space and let that run its course, because eventually they're going to calm down. It's just a matter of how long that's going to take. But we want to be as supportive as possible in that.
I'd add the thing to remember is you really don't have to worry about them hurting themselves, even when they're hitting themselves or if they're hitting their head on the wall. They usually stop before they actually hurt themselves. So, you know, remember, keep that in mind.
Yeah. All right, ready for the next scenario?
Yes.
So if you have a student that is a runner and takes off out of the classroom door, what do you do?
Run after them.
Follow them. Great. Any other thoughts?
If you can, like maybe putting somebody that's just kind of at the door. And so when they're starting to make a run for the door, you avoid that in the first place. If you know you have a runner, you kind of just position.
Yes, that is great. Prevention is very, very important. This is obviously something that can be an extremely, extremely dangerous situation, especially if they get outside of the building. So this is where having that prevention is really important. And in order to keep the students safe, you do need to follow them and go after them. A lot of times, though, our individuals want to make it a game where it's super fun and you're chasing them. So we don't want that, because then it's going to become a game every single week. And so that's the last thing that we want. So what we generally do is we just try to keep them in eyesight. And we want to see that they're not going to leave the building. So we want to see that they're, we're going to first, like we really encourage having walkie-talkies, creating a code with your security team, children's ministry, student ministry, all those people, so that when someone escapes the classroom door, you first are following them, but also at the same time radioing and saying, for us, we say code green. Code green means go. And we say the student's name and what they're wearing and kind of where they're at within the building, so that other people can come and help find them, but also so that people can block the exits. It's not where we're going to lock the doors because we don't want any sort of fire hazards with that, but we do want to just block them so that we won't get them outside of the building. If this is something that's going on frequently, it could be something where we're going to ask them to hold your hand because they're not going to be able to, they're not being safe. It's something where you can use these first then statements so that they know the expectations. So first we're going to use our walking feet, and then we're going to get to do worship or whatever that may be that they're going to. Reminding them of their reinforcement system prior to or after they are moving, because especially during transitions, that's whenever someone is prone to leave. And so we can have them have their starboard or some other form of reinforcement, where you can say, remember, we're working towards this whenever we use our walking feet and we stay with the group. And we can remind them that staying on task is showing Christ-like behavior, those sort of things, encouraging them in that way. One thing that we found that is just really golden is a sheet of bubble wrap. And so that's something where they can pop the bubbles while they're walking, and they're not even focusing on the fact that they could be running away or finding something else to go and do. They're just popping the bubbles. So we'll do like a 1 foot by 1 foot little sheet of bubble wrap. And that's another thing where, just like the fidgets, we can tell other kids this is something that they need to help them focus and be safe. And kids are pretty understanding of that. If this is something that's going on consistently, this is something that we would want to discuss with parents, just to figure out what's working at home or at school. You might need to figure out a different reward system, those sort of things. And you're wanting to figure out the trigger behind why they're running. Are they trying to escape something? Are they trying to get attention? Are they just not wanting to do something else? Whatever that is, and just continuing to think through what's going to keep them safe.
Any questions? No? Okay.
Great. What do you tell the parents if the child you're with has not been compliant all service and you're irritated with how the day went?
Try to be positive, and then you tell them, explain to them why.
Yeah, so I heard positives, which is great. And then I heard still kind of talking to the parent. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just tell them the positive stuff that happened with their child.
But it wasn't, they were bad, we just struggled with.
Yes.
So, like, we just struggled with this, but this is what they did positive while they were here.
Yeah, so reframing what's going on is always important. So what I like to point out in this scenario is that you're the one irritated with how the day went. And so it could be that they, were they're fine. And so if they just sat under the table all service, that happens, and that can be irritating on your part. But it was not harming themselves. It was not hurting anyone else. It was just that they weren't wanting to do something. And that's okay. So we try to think about this in the scenario of parents are always hearing negatives about their child. So we're wanting to focus on the positives. And we like to ask the question, do the parents really need to know? Do the parents really need to know if their child was sitting under the table all service? No, like that's okay. And we can still give the lesson whenever the child's under the table. That's okay. And so that's something where you can be the person that is really, really positive, and the church is able to be a place of refuge where they know that their child's going to be loved on. They're not going to be judged in that. And so if you are just really overwhelmed and you're frustrated about what you're going to say to the parents, or you aren't able to focus on the positive within this, you'll get somebody else to talk to them. Make sure that you're not sharing raw emotions with the parent while they're trying to pick up, and just trying to figure out if this is something that really needs to be shared or not. One thing that we always try to do is tell the parents something good that happens. We always want to tell them a positive, no matter what the day was like. We want to do that. We do that with all of our events. We encourage every single one of our volunteers to focus on those good things and to be able to share at least one good thing with parents. And so if it's some behavior that's just completely out of the norm for an individual, you may want to tell them. If they're normally someone that always engages really helpful, well with their peers, and they're really interactive, and today they wanted to sit in a corner and not interact at all and were really standoffish, that might be something that you want to tell the parents of, just, hey, they didn't really want to interact today like normal, because it could be something where they have a stomach ache, or they didn't sleep well the night before. And so that might be something where you want to tell parents, but that's just figuring out what is the norm for them, that's building upon that relationship. If you do have something that's negative that you need to tell the parents, the child hit someone, they bit someone, they broke something, and it could have hurt them or something like that, you want to sandwich that. So we want to say a positive that happened. They did a great job welcoming everyone in the classroom and saying hi to all their friends. And then you want to say whatever happened, you just want to state the facts of that. Hey, they were playing with another toy, or with another friend. Their friend took their toy, and then they hit them, and it ultimately we were able to resolve the situation, but wanted to just let you know that happened today. And then we want to say another positive. They did an amazing job worshiping God and music and story today. They did all the motions and had so much fun. We love having them, and we can't wait to see you next week. So we want to sandwich that as much as possible and just show we are so, so, so happy to have your child here. And so that's kind of how we take that. And ultimately, especially depending on what the negative event is, if it's they bit someone, that sort of thing, it may not be that comes from the volunteer, but where you're stepping in as a staff member and sharing that. So making sure of who needs to have those conversations is really important as well.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick. Share one of my favorite stories. Like Elizabeth said, always recommend you always share something positive with a parent whenever they pick up. I think that's a great thing. One of my favorite stories, I had a buddy who actually got sick during, our time, and about 15 minutes before they left was when she got sick. So I sent her home and I jumped in the room to help take care of the individual. Well, then the parents came and I'm like, oh snap, I got to come up with something positive to share. And so they came and thought, and I'm like, what do I say? And I just said, first thing that popped in my mind, and I said, Johnny did a great job playing with the others today. And he did. It wasn't a lie. But as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the most lame thing I could say positive. Why couldn't I come with it? And mom immediately go, he did what? I said, he played well with the others. And she broke down and started crying. And she said, you know what, Doc? I've been fighting with the school for 2 weeks because that's part of his IEP. And the school has signed off that he is starting to play well with others. And I refuse to sign that off because I'm not seeing it. And I thought the school's lying, just trying to push his IEP, saying they're doing a good job. And I've been refusing it. And I'm trying to sue the school over it. But if you're saying that's happening, then it really must be happening. I just have to open my eyes. And over the next 2 days, she saw her son interacting well with others. And she went back to the school, apologized. It changed her whole relationship with the school. So that one statement I made to mom, no matter how stupid I thought it was, it truly was God using me to help her, changed her whole relationship with that school and her son. So, those positive comments can really go a long ways.
Right. Our next scenario is one of the classmates wants to play kitchen with the child that you're working with and wants to include them in the activity. The child is nonverbal. How can you assist so that the child is included and encourage the peer to keep involved with the child with special needs?
Have them cutting something, or like if you're doing it in the play setting, have them mix something in the bowl, as imaginary as that is.
Yeah, that's great. So continuing just to encourage that interaction, playing and being a part of that. That's great. What else?
Let them set the table. In the kitchen, give them all the little kitchen bowls and set the table.
Yes. So that's awesome. Peers often want to direct questions or different parts of playing to the adult helper with the child. And so you want to be sure to include the child in the response. So they may say, do they like cookies or that sort of thing? Do they want to make the tea, that sort of, and you can just reframe that and say, well, let's ask them. And so then you can, especially with individuals that are nonverbal, they may say, yes or no by shaking their head. They may use sign language a little bit, or you can do hands and have two options that way and say, would you like to set the table, or would you like to make some macaroni and cheese in the kitchen, and encourage that interaction that way. And you're also modeling to that peer how you can communicate. You want to step back in this interaction as much as possible and encourage them to play with one another. And so you can just continue to verbalize, to give verbal instructions to the peers to ask questions and help them to ask questions to one another. And you can show them how they're really more similar than they are different. You can encourage the peer to use yes and no questions, or you can use it as an opportunity to teach them some sign language. And so you can just make sure that they're sharing with the nonverbal student, and then just really encourage and promote any social interactions, and just praise them and say, thank you, you're being a great friend. And you can, even whenever you have positives that you want to share to the whole class of, hey, I'm noticing that they've done a great job playing together today. Thanks for including one another and sharing, and just really promoting that. All right, well, let's go on to the next scenario. You are in kids worship with the class, and the child that you are assigned to is sitting or lying quietly on the floor, but not engaged in worship. What can you do?
Give them their space.
Yeah, definitely. Any other options?
Yeah, say sit next to him.
Sit next to him. Great. So you can be a model for the student. You can follow along with any actions that are happening. Especially for kids with autism, worship could be really stimulating, and they might be in that sensory overload. So sitting there is just the best that they can do. And so that could be where, modeling is great. Sitting next to them, great. And just realize that, like Doc shared earlier with the individual that was playing with the fidget in class, realize that even though they may not appear to be involved, they're still able to learn and understand what's going on. And that's something where if you just encourage that, that's great. If the child does not appear to be in sensory overload, then you could vocalize to the student that it's really fun and that they should do it. If this doesn't work, you can even try hand over hand and doing the motions with them. If they're not doing well with that, then just allow them to sit on the floor and engage in worship in their own way. So ultimately, this kind of goes back to knowing the student, knowing that relationship, encouraging it, but not pushing too much, kind of pick your battles, that sort of thing. All right, let's move on to our final scenario. You have a student who is having a seizure. What do you do?
Give them space, don't hold them.
I don't know if you heard, she said, don't hold them and give them their space.
Okay.
Around them that they can hurt themselves.
And make sure there's nothing around them they can hurt themselves with or on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the very, very first thing that you want to do is check the clock. You can look at your watch, you can ask someone what the time is, you can look on the wall, but you want to figure out the time of the seizure. This is extremely, extremely important for any medical personnel to know. If seizures are over 5 minutes, they're considered a medical emergency. So knowing that initial time is really, really important. And then just like you said, make sure that the student's safe, that they're away from the wall, that they're lying on the ground. Do not put anything in their mouth. They're not going to bite off their tongue either. And call for help. So that's something where, especially like me, seizures can make me a little bit nervous, but I can know, I don't have to be in charge for very long. There's other people that are going to come and help me in this situation. And if this is something that happens on a regular basis and doesn't last very long, you do not have to call the parents if it's something that you know very frequently. However, you do need to always tell them whenever they have had a seizure. That's important for the parents to know. But if it's something that happens so frequently for a family, you don't need to go get them or notify them at that time. If it's the very first time the child's had a seizure, if you aren't aware of them having seizures, call the parents immediately because they need to know what's going on. Then after a seizure, the student may be really lethargic and tired. They might be unable to keep their balance. So we want to have 2 people on their sides. Make sure that they don't do a little face plant whenever they try and stand up. So we can just encourage them, lay back down and rest, because a seizure is really, really exhausting for the body. And so I think it's, for every 1 minute that someone's doing, having a seizure, it's the equivalent of running a full marathon. And so if they've just had a 3-minute seizure, it's like doing a 3 full marathons. So they're just absolutely spent. And so just make sure that they're safe, and that they're not going to try and get up right away. They're going to be a little out of it and groggy. And so you can just explain to them, hey, you just had a seizure. We need to rest. And don't make them feel bad. Oh,
Don't
yeah,
make
of
them feel
course.
bad, yeah.
Don't make them feel bad. Of course, it is not their fault. So that's very important.
And it's common that they're going to be scared afterwards, because during the seizure, they have amnesia from it. No one's going to remember having the seizure. So they only remember right before it. So when they wake up and they've got 2 people on the side of them, just talk calmly to them and, hey, it's okay, Susie, you're fine. We got you. And you can tell them you just had a seizure or whatever, and just talk through it, especially if they know they've had seizures. And then, the one thing I'll say, you might have a student in your ministry that might have a VNS, a vagal nerve stimulator, and that's where they've got a magnet implanted in their chest. And then the parents will give you a magnet. When they start having a seizure, you simply wave that magnet over their chest and the seizure stops just like that. But the parents will let you know that, and they will leave the magnet with you. You wear it like a bracelet, and it all does well.
That's cool.
How common is that?
I didn't hear that question.
She's asking how common is that, with the magnet?
The vagal, it's fairly common among a lot of individuals with seizures. Well, common, but not horribly common. 10%.
Yeah, like for me, I've never used one. I know individuals that have them. I know that it's available. I've never had to use it. So
Yeah, 10-15% of participants that we've got probably have them, that have seizures. But individuals with autism, especially, about 50% of individuals with autism have seizures.
Wow.
All right, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to take the last one here, and this is just an extra educational piece. I think it's important to talk about for all of you. I want, again, this is an education piece, and it's Charlotte's Web. And this is not the great children's book. This is actually medical marijuana. It's marijuana for seizures in particular. So I want to talk to you about it real quick, wearing 3 different hats. My first hat is that as a pediatrician. I'm completely against this. I have a hard time giving a child or anyone medical marijuana that's going to kill brain cells, especially when they already have abnormal brain cells for seizures. Now, I put on my hat as a parent. My son, as I shared, had Dravet syndrome. Charlotte, who this is named after, has Dravet syndrome. Dravet syndrome is a very tough seizure disorder that takes multiple drugs to deal with. We were blessed. My son's seizures were bad, but he still had quality of life. Most of these individuals are seizing 23.5 hours a day. And so they have 0 quality of life. So as a parent, I would do anything in my power to try to give my child a little bit better quality of life. And that if this would work, I would do it. Now I'm putting on my third hat as a pastor, as a church leader. It is not our role as a church to make a decision if this is right or not for a parent to do. Unfortunately, I have worked with many churches, many families who have made the statement that families cannot do this. They do not believe in it. And they've actually kicked these families out of their church. It's absolutely okay for the church to say, we don't believe you should do marijuana or do CBD oil or any of that. And you can't do it on our campus, but you can't sit there and say they can't attend the church, especially these families. So, please keep that in mind, and don't be so dogmatic with that as going through everything. Please be aware how important it is. Put yourself in other people's shoes and realize, and there's nothing in the Bible that says it's sinful. We don't tell people who are having adulterous affairs that they can't attend the church because they had an affair. We want to share Jesus with them. Well, we want to do the same thing with families with disabilities. So just real quick, education, word of thought there. So with that, let's open up for more questions. Here's our contact information for you. If you want to get hold of both Elizabeth and myself, you can email us at info@soarspecialneeds.org. Instead of putting doc, just do info. That'll get both Elizabeth and I. Our office phone number is there, our cell phone. But with that, thank you so much for time. But want to open it up for any other questions you may have. And I'll stop the share so you can see all of us.
One question I do have is here in our church. Hi, everybody. In our church, we actually do have some amazing volunteers, but we never have enough. And so being that you worked in special needs ministry for so long, how do we go about retaining volunteers and getting and recruiting so that way we have them here to be able to do the buddy system and to be one-on-one more with these children?
Yeah. Especially, keeping and retaining the volunteers that you have is super important. Caring for them really, really well, making it like a family, really encouraging them, make sure that they're not overextending themselves, that you're not constantly burdening them, but you're making sure that they're getting rest and breaks as well, is really important. And just continuing to follow up with them, talking about things that are outside of church, seeing what's going on in their life. How can you be praying for them? Making it really, really fun to just be there. Those are some great ways. Whenever you know that something's going on that week, sending them a text and saying, hey, praying for you, thinking about this, just checking in, especially if a volunteer says that they need a break, saying, okay, thank you for letting me know, and just trusting that, not pushing them on that is super important. So especially if a volunteer shows up or cancels at the last minute, saying, thank you for letting me know, not trying to push, hey, are you sure you can't come? That sort of thing. But really encouraging that. And then on the recruiting side of it, we have seen shoulder tapping be extremely, extremely successful. So that's identifying someone that you think is going to serve really well in the special needs ministry. Maybe it's someone that one of your individuals keeps coming up with and they, give them high fives, that sort of thing, or whatever it may be, that you notice that they're extremely patient and going up to them. And Doc has these 4 letters that he likes to say. It's I, C, and U. And so it's going and saying, hey, I see in you someone who's patient and really fun to be around, someone that, our individuals with special needs are really gravitating towards. And I would love to ask you to pray about serving in this ministry opportunity. And so what we do with that is we're asking them to pray about it. We're putting it in God's hands. We're not asking them immediately to serve, but then saying, hey, would you pray about this? And they'll say, sure, and you say, okay, great. Can we meet back up for coffee in 2 weeks and talk about this and what it could look like to serve in the ministry? And that's whenever you can go and say, and hear back, what are their thoughts? What are they passionate about? And normally success rate with that is about like 95%, which is amazing. And normally the people that say no are only those people that are already serving in really high level volunteer capacities in another area. And so it's just too much of a burden for them. They're not able to move around that schedule, and that's okay. But another thing about getting volunteers involved is making sure that they're in the right volunteer niche. And so we have plenty of people that come and they serve with us and they're amazing. but they want to support the ministry, but they're not super comfortable working as a one-on-one buddy, and that's okay. So we've had people that have served and they're prepping materials throughout the week. They are helping get things organized. They're encouraging other volunteers. We have people that will put together little encouragement bags and say, you know, we want s'more volunteers like you, and it's, you know, graham cracker and marshmallow and chocolate and cost nothing. And so that's something where we've had volunteers that say, I really like to encourage people, or I really like to lead music or write curriculum, or I have whatever passion in maximizing that and not necessarily trying to put them in your box and fill your needs.
A couple of things that are really good for that and important: use the people you already have. The best way to get volunteers is through video and sharing stories. Two people that I know already that you need to tap into. One is your pastor there, who mentioned having a son, have him, you know, sharing some of the stories in that. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Was it Anita or Anita?
Yeah.
Anita, I would love to see you do a video and share what your story is and how important it is for you to be able to go to church and know that someone's there to take care of your child, and how difficult it is just to be able to get ready to go to church, because being able to get ready and go to church is a challenge. And so we need to teach people that it's hard and how challenging that is, and make that awareness there. At the same time, you can get other volunteers who are already there and get their story and share those stories and make that there. Because unfortunately, putting something in the bulletin doesn't work. It doesn't get people there. But I'm pretty, and your church may be different because you got a great turnout. But I know the majority of churches have 80% of the work being done by 20% of the people. And you know what that means is 80% of the people are sitting in your church doing nothing. What are they? They are knickknacks collecting dust. And we've got to find a way to knock the dust off them and get them motivated. How do we motivate them? Stories. And we got to be passionate about it. And, you know, when we tell stories and we're doing everything, we can't be Eeyore. Oh, please come serve in our ministry. We've got kids. We've got to be passionate and let them know how amazing it is and how they will be blessed. And I tell everyone all the time, you will be worn out working with these amazing friends, but you're going to be blessed beyond all you do. And I'll tell you, if they come back. The other thing I want everyone to remove from their vocabulary: you never ask anyone to give it a try for a month or 6 weeks. That fails, because they'll give you that and then they're gone. And you never tell anyone you're trying to fill holes. Those two things need to be removed from the vocabulary. You're seeking people, and then you try to find the things they're passionate about and get them filled in, and you'll see a huge change with that. When you can match passion with, and the reason I like that whole I see in you, when we get God laying in someone's heart that yes, we are called to this, and we're calling them out and showing them what to do, God's doing all the heavy work for us, and then we match them with their passion, you've now got a volunteer who's there for the long haul, and it's a blessing.
And another way that we have found getting some great volunteers is giving them really easy touch point opportunities to just interact with individuals with disabilities. And so one option for that is hosting a respite night or partnering up with a church that is doing that and encouraging some volunteers to go over there. Like for us, we have our special needs summer camps that is a great touch point opportunity too, where you volunteer for just a few hours, you fall in love with it, and then decide, oh, well, I want to do this on the weekends. And we see that time and time and time again. So that's something too, where it might be, you're going to have a time where you have a group that's going to go hang out at a group home, because there's plenty of group homes that need interaction and want socialization. And that's a great touch point opportunity. Or, you know, doing something for the local special education classroom and getting volunteers opportunities to interact with low commitments are really, really great, to be able to get them to come on Sundays and be really high high level volunteers ultimately.
And we're also doing a virtual summer camp. And that's something where you can get people to help with you. It's something you can offer to your families at your church. And you can even turn it into like a special needs vacation Bible school at your church, where you can have that easy on ramp for people. And we do all the heavy lifting for you. The volunteers there really would have very little to do, just hang out and be friends. And we do all the curriculum, we do everything for you, and you just there along for the ride, and we support you. So if you're interested in that, Elizabeth's your gal for it.
Great. Any final questions?
Any more questions, anybody?
I don't have a question, but I was thinking about something that was asked earlier regarding our sweet 3-year-old that kind of struggles. One thing that I've utilized when I've been working with him is like when I see him being nice, I point it out and I go, oh my gosh, look at you. You're sharing. You're being awesome. I am so proud of you, dude. You keep that up. I want to see that again. And when I do that, he does that behavior more and more, because like that particular individual thrives on being loved.
Yes.
So I really recommend that when you see a child that's really struggling, that you go out of your way to find those good things and just partner with them and get them excited to be good too, because then they'll love you and rise because they want that love, that attention. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're working with that little guy, because he does real well with it.
You use it on me too. It works really good.
So good. Good job, dude.
Amen. And it works with all of our friends. And I agree completely with you. And that's why we always say give praise frequently. But absolutely, that's a great point. Well done.
When we create a praise junkie, isn't that what we don't want to do? Because like,
Not if we're praising for the right.
No,
the right
you're
thing
you're praising for good things.
Yes.
And if you're getting them to do, you're not praising just for anything. You're praising them for behavior you want to see. And so when you're praising for behavior you want to see, you're going to see it more frequently. And it doesn't mean you're going to continue to praise every single time they do it, because it's going to happen more frequently. You may back off how often you do it, but if you see, I'll just call him Johnny. Johnny is being nice to somebody, you'll praise him for that, and all of a sudden he starts doing it more and more, instead of doing it every time, maybe every other time, every third time, but he's still going to be doing it, and you're rewarding that behavior with it, and so we're getting more behavior that we want with it, and that's absolutely okay, and use that to our advantage. The reason we get bad behavior a lot of times is kids actually want attention. And so many times by them getting in trouble doing what we don't want, we're giving them negative attention. They don't care if they're getting in trouble. They want that attention. And so we are actually hurting ourselves by giving them the attention they want for the negative behavior. Instead, if we give them the attention for the positive behavior, they're still getting the attention, but we're rechanging their behavior to do what we want. And really, isn't that what any parent does with our kids anyways, is we're raising them, we're giving them praise for what we want to see and trying to correct. So just doing that helps anyone.
And you're being proactive.
Yeah.
Being proactive, absolutely. And Anita's right. My wife does it with me all the time too. Or she's even proactive with it, like last night, honey, I'd really love if you'd wash the dishes for me.
Oh my.
So you can do that with our kids too, say, hey, Johnny, it would be so amazing if you'd sit here, or play with this with our group. I'd love that, and something like that. You might get a response. And yes, I wash the dishes.
All right. Any final questions from anybody?
Anybody? No? I think we're good on this end.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I apologize for the technical difficulties and us being late getting going.
Oh, so
good
I
news
apologize.
is it finally stopped snowing here. But we're super excited for you. So happy with what you're doing. We are here for you. If there's anything you need, just let us know. But before we end, can I pray over your church as you
Absolutely.
move forward with everything? All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me close this in prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, God, I just thank you so much for Foothills Southern Baptist Church. And Lord, I just pray for them. I thank you for every individual who's able to attend this training today and those who are going to hear it in the future with a recording. God, I just pray that you help this church as they are eager to welcome families with disabilities and include the individuals of all ages into their all their ministries and especially Awana. God, I just pray that you bless their Awana ministry. I pray for every volunteer here. Just give them wisdom and discernment as they're moving through. God, I pray for the families that come. I pray for all the individuals with disabilities as well. And I just pray that Foothills will become a light in the city and a beacon of light, and just pray that that this will be a start of a revival in Yuma, God, that we just see many individuals, many kids come to Christ, and in return, many families come to Christ just through opening the doors and welcoming families with disabilities. God, I thank you for Crystal and her heart and getting this moving. Thank you for the pastor and his heart with this, and just watch over this entire church and bless them all now. And thank you for this partnership, and just pray that we can continue to support Foothills and be with them as they move forward now. We turn this all over to you, and thank you for all that you do now. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate you
Yeah,
all.
have a great day.
You all have a great day and stay warm. Enjoy the sunshine for us.
Oh, we
I think-
will.
I think I've got some snow shoveling to go do.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.